والسلام على من لا نبي بعد نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, فإنشاءالله we'll continue with reading from the book known as شرح اصول اعتقاد أهل السنة والجماعة. شرح اصول اعتقاد أهل السنة والجماعة للإمام سبحان الله أبي القاسم هبة الله ibn al-Hasan ibn Mansur al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 418 after the Hijrah. And we're still in that chapter, the context of what was related regarding those who preserve the Sunnah and revive the Sunnah and call to the Sunnah. What is the compensation? What is the compensation? What is the reward for the people who preserve, revive, and invite others to the Sunnah? And so we've covered some ground in this chapter, and we'll continue with the statement of the author. He says, أخبرنا الحسين بن أحمد بن إبراهيم الطبري قال حدثنا عبيد الله بن سعيد البروجردي قال حدثنا عبد الله بن محمد بن وهب الدينوري قال حدثنا إسماعيل بن أبي خالد قال حدثنا أيوب بن السويد عن عبد الله بن شوذب عن أيوب أنه قال إن من سعادة الحدث والأعجم أن يوفقهما الله لعالم من أهل السنة. He says that Al-Husayn ibn Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Tabari, he informed us, he said that Ubaydullah ibn Sa'id al-Burujirdi narrated to us. He said that Abdullah ibn Muhammad ibn Wahb al-Dainuri narrated to us. He said that Ismail ibn Abi Khalid narrated to us. He said that Ayyub ibn Suwaid narrated to us on the authority of Abdullah ibn Shawdhab, on the authority of Ayyub, who said that indeed, and this is that same Ayyub as-Sakhtiyani, right? We talked about in the previous chapters. The author was setting us up for some of the statements of Ayyub, mentioning the praise of people like Ibn Aoun and Ayyub as-Sakhtiyani. So here's another statement of Ayyub. He says, on the authority of Ayyub, who said, indeed, from the delight of a new convert, a hadith, right? Somebody hadithul ahdi bil Islam, right? Somebody who is new in their Islam. Indeed, from the delight or from the joy that can be experienced by a new convert, right? An Arab accepts Islam who wasn't a Muslim before, he's a hadith, right? Hadithul ahd bil kufr or hadithul ahd bil Islam. Somebody who was fresh from kufr or somebody who was fresh in Islam, al hadith. Indeed, from the delight of a hadith or a non-Arab, al-A'jami, right? From the things that are from the delight, from the good fortune, right? From somebody who is a new Arab or who is an Arab who is newly converted to Islam, or somebody who is a non-Arab who enters into Islam, from the things that are from their good fortune or from the things that can bring them delight, and yuwaffiqahumullahu li'alimin min ahli sunnah, is that Allah will give them success. Allah will put them on the path to be in the company of a scholar from the people of the Sunnah. Right, this is a statement that's well known. إن من سعادة الأعراب والأعجم أن إذا أسلم يوفق إلى صاحب سنة وإن من تعاستهما وشقاوتهما أن إذا أسلم يوفق إلى صاحب بدعة. From the good fortune of an Arab and a non-Arab when they accept Islam is that Allah blesses them to be in the companionship of a person on the Sunnah. And from their wretchedness and from the things that are bad in their portion, or from the things that indicate their wretchedness, is that when they accept Islam, they would be given over to a person of innovation. These are statements that are well known, but this version of Ayyub, he says that from the things that bring the new convert or the non-Arab joy or delight is that Allah gives them success to be, i.e., in the company of a scholar from the people of the Sunnah. But this statement is clear, right? That from the best fortune of a new Muslim or a non-Arab who accepts Islam is that his companionship would be with one who is upon the Sunnah. What does this have to do with the reward of the one who calls to the Sunnah or revives the Sunnah or preserves the Sunnah? Without a doubt, this scholar is doing this. This scholar that Allah has blessed the individual to be in their company is doing these things. He's preserving the religion. He's reviving the religion. He's calling to the religion. But what does this statement of Ayub have to do with the reward of that person? Remember, this chapter is about the reward of such people. So what does this statement of Ayub have to do with the reward of such people? Allah knows best. Perhaps the connection between this chapter and the reward of the people who preserve, revive, and call to the Sunnah is that Allah has made them a sign of his blessing and of the good fortune that he wants for the slave. So from the qualities of the people of knowledge, there are a lot of statuses and a lot of benefits that they get because they're the people of knowledge and because they are the people of the Sunnah. So, for example, we mentioned how Allah made looking at a person of the Sunnah, calling to it, an act of worship. And we know that Allah Azza wa Jal references the people of knowledge as being the witnesses of Allah on this earth, and how Allah makes the people of knowledge the blessing of other people. And that shows a status that only the person of knowledge and the person of the Sunnah can obtain, that Allah makes you the blessing. And this is the statement that is similar to like the dua of Ibrahim. I'm sorry, the dua of Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. Wa mubarakan aynama kuntu wa awsani. Right? Wa mubarakan haythu ma kuntu. Wa mubarakan aynama kuntu. Is it ayna or haytha? This is the problem when you're muraja'ah and a person might notice, wallahi, like the abundance of referring things back to when a person says something to make sure that I'm accurate in it. It's for the sake of this information is being preserved. And so it's important that an individual not have preserved a fault. And most of us, whoever talks in abundance, his mistakes are going to be in abundance. And so it's important that since this information is being preserved, as it's always being preserved by Allah, but since this information is being preserved, we don't want to leave something that we later on have to come back and edit or correct. And there's no problem with the person making a mistake, a slip of the tongue, their memory not being as thorough, or as, trill, whatever, as thorough as it should be. So we're humans. We have to go back and verify and make sure that we didn't make any mistakes. So this ayat is just something that now I can't remember the word. Is it mubarakan haythu ma kuntu wa awsani bis salati wa zakati ma dumtu hayya, or mubarakan ayna ma kuntu? I think it's ayna ma kuntu. Wa mubarakan ayna ma kuntu. Now, sometimes you just doubt, and so you want to be sure. The point of it is that this is an example how Allah makes you the blessing. This is an example of the dua of Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. Isa, when he made the statement about how Allah preferred him, he said, now I can't remember the portion before the ayah. Dhalika Isa, no, before that. What's the ayah before that? Subhanallah. قال إني عبد الله آتاني الكتاب وجعلني نبيا وجعلني مباركا أينما كنت وأوصاني بالصلاة والزكاة ما دمت حيا. He says that, and Allah has, he says that I am the slave of Allah, and Allah has made me a prophet. Allah has given me the book and made me a prophet, and he has made me blessed wherever I am. Meaning that Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, wherever he goes, he is the blessing in that area. And so this shows us a status that the slave who was knowing of Allah and upon knowledge and upon Sunnah and upon Tawheed, the status that they receive, that they become the blessing wherever they are. And so perhaps this statement of Ayub is connected to this chapter, the reward of the person of the Sunnah who calls to it, revives it, and preserves it, that this person becomes the blessing wherever they are. Because he says that from the good fortune or from the delight of the person who is a new convert from the Arabs or a non-Arab is that Allah will give them the success. He will bless them with being in the companionship of a scholar from the people of the Sunnah. So Allah has made these people the blessing. And indeed, without a doubt, these people are the blessing of Allah on this earth. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said to that individual, لَعَلَّكَ تُرْزَقُ بِي, when that brother complained about his brother who he was taking care of, who his brother was busy learning and worshiping Allah, the Prophet ﷺ, he said to him, perhaps you are provided for because of him. Perhaps you are provided for because of him. So perhaps this is the connection, and Allah knows best. But in every narration, you want to try to look and see what's the connection between the chapter title and between the actual narration that is being mentioned. The next narration he mentions, he says, أخبرنا أحمد بن محمد بن حسنون أو حسنون قال حدثنا جعفر بن محمد بن نصير قال حدثنا جعفر بن محمد قال حدثنا جعفر بن محمد بن نصير قال حدثنا أحمد بن محمد بن مسروق قال حدثنا محمد بن هارون أبو نشيط قال حدثنا أبو عمير بن نحاس قال حدثنا ضمرة عن ابن شوذب قال إن من نعمة الله على الشاب إذا نسك أن يؤاخي صاحب سنة يحمله عليها. He says that Ahmed ibn Muhammad ibn Hassanun informed us. He said that Ja'far ibn Muhammad ibn Nusayr narrated to us. He said that Ahmed ibn Muhammad ibn Masruq narrated to us. He said that Muhammad ibn Harun Abu Nashiq narrated to us. He said that Abu Umayr ibn Nahas, or Abu Umayr ibn Nahas narrated to us. He said that Dhamra narrated to us on the authority of Ibn Shawdhab. And Ibn Shawdhab is the same one who narrated on Ayub in the previous narration. So this is an example of a student repeating the information that he learned from his teacher. Because Ibn Shawdhab, he says, indeed from the blessing of Allah upon the youth, indeed from the blessing of Allah upon the youthful individual, when he develops a sense of worship and righteousness, either nasak, right? When he gets on his deen, right? When he starts practicing, right? How we say in our vernacular nowadays, I was a Muslim back in 96, but I didn't start practicing until 98, right? Ibn Shawdhab, he says, indeed from the blessing of Allah upon the youthful person. Allahu Akbar. Indeed, from the blessing of Allah upon a youthful person is that when he starts practicing, when he starts adhering to the religion, he is given the companionship of a person, or he is made a brother. He befriends a person upon the Sunnah who will support him upon that. From the blessing of Allah upon the young person when they start to practice and implement their religion is that they befriend and become a brother to a person on the Sunnah who will support them, who will carry them upon that, right? They will support and influence them in that. Wallahi, that's from the greatest ni'am, especially for the young individual, right? I remember us being young, and these are from the blessings of Allah upon the slave, and from the things that we have to make sure that we leave an opportunity for our youth to be on that same example. How many of us, right? I accepted Islam when I was 13, alhamdulillah, and I started practicing when I was 15. And from the success of Allah is that you come across people upon the Sunnah, who carry you upon the Sunnah, who support you in the Sunnah, right? You might make mistakes. You might be pig-headed. You might be aggressive. You might be overzealous along the way. But how much of a blessing is it to have somebody who reminds you about the Sunnah, that you can grow up on the Sunnah? And this is something that a lot of people don't have. And that's why you look and you see so many people who the Sunnah to them is strange, and the Sunnah to them is something unknown. And it's because there was nobody when they were young encouraging them to the Sunnah, inviting them and supporting them on the Sunnah. So this is the blessing. Allah makes these people the blessing of Allah on this earth. And so if you have somebody in your community who is on the Sunnah, inviting to the Sunnah, calling to the Sunnah, then you need to befriend this person. You need to be in the companionship and in the company of this person, because these people are the blessing of Allah in their communities, and especially for the youth. From the things that I notice from especially the Arab that we might not do as much of here is that they take their children around the scholars and the people of benefit in their community, right? And not just to let them come when I gotta go out, I gotta carry them with me, and this is a burden and this is a chore. Why couldn't you stay at home? But no, like they make them come and they make them sit and learn and be in their presence, so that those characteristics and those etiquettes rub off on the children and they grow up in the presence of that blessing, that it reaches them. And so when they reach adulthood and youth and puberty and things like this, they have received some of that blessing and some of that culture and some of that education. So they're not allowed to just run around in the masjid when they go in the masjid. If they bring their children to the lecture, to the class, or to the person that came from out of town to visit, they make their children sit down and they pay attention. They introduce them to the sheikh. They introduce them to the student. They introduce them to the brother, and they let them see how to participate. They don't let them play on their tablets and their phone in the back of the masjid, or run around with the youth and say, well, they're still children, right? From the blessing of these individuals is that when they start to try to practice, they'll have a companion and somebody who encourages them and supports them and even forces them upon the Sunnah. And from the mistakes that one might make in understanding this is thinking that that companion or that friend has to be a contemporary or somebody in the same age bracket. No, from the blessing, and Allah knows best, is that that person is older than them. Somebody who has experienced the things in the Sunnah that this individual is going to go through, and thus they're able to navigate through it through their guidance or with their guidance. And this is why you see that a lot of the times the scholar will have a student who's 10 years younger than him, 12 years, 15 years younger than him, that is like a companion, where we might say, well, these are, a 40-year-old and a 55-year-old, they're two old men. But in reality, it's that this person is like a student, where this one was 15, this one was 25 or 30, and they're using each other to learn. And this is from the blessing, to learn from the experiences and the lifestyles and the actions of others, right? So it doesn't mean that the sheikh has to be 70 and you drop a 20-year-old there, or that the friend has to be 15 just like the kid is 15. But if there's a difference where they can benefit, like the older one who's 30 can help the one who's 15. The older one who's 35, 40 can help the one who's 15, 20 to go through and navigate those events in their life. SubhanAllah. This is from the blessing of Allah on the youthful individual, is that when he begins to practice, he is given the companionship where he befriends a person on the Sunnah who can support him or encourage him upon it. اللالكائي, he says, أخبرنا عيسى بن علي قال أخبرنا عبد الله بن محمد البغوي قال حدثنا محمد بن هارون قال حدثنا سعيد بن شبيب قال سمعت يوسف بن أسباط يقول كان أبي قدريا وأخوالي روافض فأنقذني الله بسفيان. Here he's mentioning an example of what the statement of Ayyub and the statement of Ibn Shawdhab was referring to. So he says that Isa ibn Ali informed us. He said that Abdullah ibn Muhammad al-Baghawi informed us. He said that Muhammad ibn Harun informed us. I'm sorry, narrated to us. He said that Sa'id ibn Shabib narrated to us. He said that I heard Yusuf ibn Asbaq. And I want to look and see Yusuf ibn Asbaq. Yusuf ibn Asbaq. This is the wrong book. Yusuf ibn Asbalt, because it's going to make a point that we were just referencing. Yusuf ibn Asbalt. Yusuf ibn Asbalt. There's two of them. I just want to make sure I got the right one. Al-Kufi and Al-Mosul. I'm pretty sure it's Al-Kufi. Right? Yusuf ibn Asbalt, Al-Kufi. Yusuf ibn Asbalt ibn Wasil al-Shaybani al-Kufi, who ended up living in a city in Helb in Antakya. He narrated on Amr ibn Shuray and Sufyan al-Thawri and Yasin al-Zayyat. I just want to see when he was born. He died in the year 195. وكان من خيار أهل زمانه مستقيما في الحديث. He was from the best people of his time, and he was very sound in hadith. I'm trying to see when he was born. He died in 195. I don't mention when he was born. The point is that Yusuf ibn Asbalt, he said, my father was a person from the Qadariyah. Yusuf ibn Asbalt, who ended up being from the best of the people of his time, he said, my father was Qadari. Right? My father was from those people who denied Allah's control over the things that happen. He was from the Qadariyah. Those people that say the person creates their own fate and that the person's actions are the result of their creation, not the creation of Allah. He said, my father was a Qadari. He says, and my maternal uncles, so his mother's brothers, were all Rawafid. They were all wretched Shia, right? Not the early Shia that might have been okay, la Rawafid. They were from the worst of the worst, right? Rawafid. He said, but Allah saved me with Sufyan. Allah saved me with Sufyan. So this individual, his father was upon bid'ah. His uncles were on a bid'ah worse than his father. But how did Allah save this person? What was the blessing that Allah blessed this person with? Allah blessed this person with Sufyan, yani Sufyan al-Thawri. It says, so Allah saved me with Sufyan. So this is an example of what they mentioned, that from the blessing of Allah for the young man, if they begin to practice the religion, is that they befriend a person on the Sunnah who will influence them to it. اللالكائي, he says, أخبرني عبيد الله بن محمد بن أحمد قال حدثنا محمد بن أحمد بن تميم الخياط قال حدثنا محمد بن يونس قال حدثنا مؤمل بن إسماعيل قال حدثنا عمارة بن زاذان قال لي أيوب يا عمارة إذا كان الرجل صاحب سنة وجماعة فلا تسأل عن أي حال كان فيه. He says that Ubaydullah ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmed informed me. He said that Muhammad ibn Ahmed ibn Tamim al-Khayyat narrated to us. He says that Muhammad ibn Yunus narrated to us. He said that Mu'ammal ibn Ismail narrated to us. He said that Umara ibn Zadhan said that Ayyub, right, that same Ayyub as-Sakhtiyani, he said that Ayyub said to me, oh Umara, if a person is a person that is on the Sunnah and part of the Jama'ah, right, this term, if the person is from the people of the Sunnah and their Jama'ah, then don't ask about what kind of condition he's in, right? Then don't ask about what kind of condition he's in. فَلَا تَسْأَلُوا أَنْ أَيِّ حَالٍ كَانَ فِيهِ. Then don't ask about what kind of condition he is in. If you know the person is from the people of the Sunnah and the people from the Jama'ah, then don't ask about what kind of condition they're in. This statement can be taken a couple of different ways. One way the statement can be taken is Don't ask about what kind of condition they're in because it's the best, right? You don't even need to ask. It's so obvious. Their condition, you don't even gotta worry about it. Their condition is the best, right? Don't even ask about that. Don't ask about what kind of condition they're in, i.e. you don't have to worry about it because they're in the best condition, i.e. this is the best a person can be. And so in this way, if it's taken to this understanding, then it's obvious the connection to the chapter title, that the reward for being a person on the Sunnah, reviving the Sunnah and calling to the Sunnah, is that you're the best type of person, the best type of condition that you can be in. There's no status or state that a person can be in that is better than that. That's one way to take this statement. Don't ask what kind of condition they're in, like the way you might say, you don't even got to ask, right? It's obvious. You don't even have to ask what kind of condition they're in. You already know what it is. That's one way that this statement can be taken. Another way this statement can be taken is, then you don't need to ask what kind of condition they're in. If a person is known to be on the Sunnah and a person is known to be a part of the Jama'ah, then you don't have to look for specific praise for that individual. You don't have to look and see who said good about him, because his actions are speaking louder than the words of others. So when we talk about in Islam how people need people to praise them and acknowledge them and recognize them and their ability and their qualifications, he's saying if a person is known to be from the people of the Sunnah and known to be from the Jama'ah, you don't even need to ask about him, because that knowledge of his circumstance is sufficient enough to serve as his qualification. And this has two benefits. Obviously, the first benefit being in the science of hadith, and like how people like even like Ibn Abdul Barr, for example, he used to say that the hadith of the Prophet, يَحْمِلُ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ مِنْ كُلِّ خَلَفٍ عُدُولُ, right? It will carry this knowledge from every succeeding generation, the best of its people. And so Ibn Abdul Barr would use this as a proof that if a person was known to be from the people of the Sunnah, you don't need specific praise about him. The general praise about him being the fact that he was known from the people of the Sunnah is good enough. And so if somebody didn't have a scholar who attested to his validity and his soundness, but he was known to be from the Sunnah, then that would be good enough. And that's similar to what one of the meanings of this statement can be. If a person is from the people of the Sunnah and their group, then you don't need to ask about what kind of condition he's in. You don't have to ask, is he good enough to take knowledge from? Is it okay to go sit with so-and-so? You know, there's a brother in our community. He's known to be on the Sunnah and he's known to be with the Jama'ah. Can I go to his class in Thalathat al-Usul? If a person is known to be from the Sunnah and to be from the Jama'ah, then you don't need to ask about what kind of condition he's in. Just go and benefit. Go and learn. Go and get your religion, because this person has done the things that qualify him to be taken from by way of his being known to be from the people of the Sunnah and their group. Which leads us to another benefit in this meaning, and that is testing the people. Something that was prominent at a certain period of time, and it comes and goes, is where people like to test people based on affiliations and relationships. So they ask them those test questions. What do you think about so-and-so? What's your position about this and that? And this is an issue that the majority of the people of knowledge, they disapprove of it. Testing people in their religion. Al-imtihan. Asking those questions to try to gauge who and what a person is. And so if a person is known to be from the Sunnah and its Jama'ah, and you don't need to ask about his condition, then you don't need to be testing the people and trying to see, well, what does he say about so-and-so, and what's his position on this and that? So these statements are beneficial in this regard. O Umara, if a person is from the people of the Sunnah and their Jama'ah, then you don't need to ask what kind of condition they're in, i.e. don't worry about it. You already know what kind of condition they're in. Or you don't need to ask about what kind of condition they're in, because their actions speak louder than words And so that's a general praise and verification of their validity, which also gives us the reminder that when our brothers are people who are known to be on the Sunnah and their Jama'ah, and who are known to have knowledge and qualifications and verification, and you're in their city, you don't have to ask the world about them, right? If they're known for this, then you can go and benefit, inshallah. But these are different statements that can be taken. Now, the next narration, he says, أخبرنا أحمد بن عبيد قال أنبأنا محمد بن الحسين قال حدثنا أحمد بن زهير قال حدثنا أحمد بن إبراهيم قال حدثني بحر بن السويد الحنفي قال سمعت حماد بن زيد قال كان أيوب يبلغه موت الفتى من أصحاب الحديث فيرى ذلك فيه، ويبلغه موت الرجل يذكر بعبادة فما يرى ذلك فيه. SubhanAllah. Remember, I told you he was setting us up for Ayub. In that last chapter, in that last section of this chapter, it was all talking about how valuable Ayub was. And now here we have maybe 5-6 statements in a row from Ayub. He says that Akhbarana, that Ahmed ibn Ubaid, he informed us. He said that Muhammad ibn Hussein informed us. He said that Ahmed ibn Zuhair narrated to us. He said that Ahmed ibn Ibrahim narrated to us. He said that Bahr ibn Suwaid al-Hanafi narrated to me. He said that I heard Hamad ibn Zayd. Hamad ibn Zayd, remember we said he was one of the two Hamads who died the same year as Imam Malik, 179. He said that Ayub, it used to reach him the death of a young person from the people of Hadith. The death of one of the young people from the people of Hadith would reach him. And you could see it in his face. You could see the anguish and the sadness in his face when he would get the news of the death of a young person from the people of Hadith. He said, and it would reach him the news of the death of a person who was known for their worship, and you wouldn't see that in his face, right? It wouldn't affect him the same way. When somebody from the people of Hadith, the people of knowledge, the people of good, the people that you have hope for in the future or for the future, when this news would reach Ayub, it would show up on his face how grieved and how sad he was to hear about the death of that individual. Where it wouldn't affect him the same way if the news reached him about a righteous person who wasn't a person from the people of Hadith, i.e. the people of knowledge, who was known for their worship. He was a good guy, known for his worship. It wouldn't affect Ayub the same way. And this goes back to the benefit that we mentioned, or the reward that we mentioned before, that this preserving the Sunnah, reviving the Sunnah, calling to the Sunnah, it makes the people who Allah loves love you. And that's a reward in itself, that the people who Allah loves you. As the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that when Allah loves a slave, he tells Jibreel to love him. And then Jibreel tells the angels of the sky that Allah loves so and so love him. And then Allah throws the acceptance of that person into the heart of the people. And so this love that the people have, this is a reward. This is a blessing from Allah that people love you. This is compensation for the one who preserves the Sunnah and revives the Sunnah and calls to the Sunnah. And what a great reward it is. When we look at the people who the generations love them, like look at how the people surrounded the people like Bin Baz with love, and Uthaymeen with love, and even the people who were a thorn in the side of the people of innovation, like Sheikh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala, how the people upon the Sunnah, the people who Allah loves, surrounded him with love, with defense. You look at the people, the likes of Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, how the people surround him with love. The people like Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan, who they surround with love. It makes the people who Allah loves love you. نحسبهم والله حسيبهم ولا نزكي على الله أحدا. Now, he says, وأخبرنا أحمد بن محمد بن حفص الحروي قال أنبأنا عبد الله بن عدي قال حدثنا إبراهيم بن عبد الله المخرمي قال حدثنا أظنه عبيد الله بن عمر القواريري قال سمعت حماد بن زيد يقول حضرت أيوب السختياني or السختياني بس السختياني وهو يغسل شعيب بن الحبحاب وهو يقول إن الذين يتمنون موت أهل السنة يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون. He says that Ahmed ibn Muhammad ibn Hafs al-Harawi informed us. He said that Abdullah ibn Adi informed us. He said that Ibrahim ibn Abdullah al-Mukharrimi narrated to us. He said that I think Ubaydullah ibn Umar al-Qawariri narrated to us. He said, I heard Hamad ibn Zayd saying, I was there with Ayyub as-Sakhtiyani or Sakhtiyani, and he was washing the body, either the body of the deceased, Shu'aib ibn Habhab. I was there with Ayyub as-Sakhtiyani when he was washing the body of Shu'aib ibn al-Habhab. And he was saying, Ayyub was saying, those who wish for the death of the people of the Sunnah, they wish to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths. And Allah will complete his light even if the disbelievers dislike it. This ayat of Allah. And so this is Ayyub talking about this individual from the people of the Sunnah who passed away. Those who wish the death of the people of the Sunnah, they want to extinguish Islam with their mouths, but Allah will complete his light even if the disbelievers dislike it. They want to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths, but Allah will complete his light even if the disbelievers dislike it. And so it's the same concept. The reward is that the people who love the Sunnah, the people who Allah love will love you. Likewise, it's making you the meaning of the statements of Allah. So it's as if Allah is referencing you in this, and it's by way of these people that Allah preserves the religion. So when we talk about the reward they get from it is their statuses and how Allah preserves the religion using these people. And so that's a status in and of itself, that Allah uses you as a tool for his worship. And this is something that is only the reward for the people who preserve the Sunnah, revive the Sunnah, call to the Sunnah. Now we'll take a couple more. He says, أخبرنا علي بن أحمد المقري قال حدثنا عبد الله بن إسحاق بن إبراهيم قال حدثنا أبو العباس البرتي قال حدثنا القعنبي قال سمعت حماد بن زيد قال قال ابن عون ثلاث أحبهن لنفسي ولأصحابي فذكر قراءة القرآن والسنة والثالث أقبل رجل على نفسه ولها من الناس إلا من خير. أقبل رجل على نفسه ولها من الناس إلا الخير. نعم ولهن أقبل رجل على نفسه ولهن من الناس إلا خير إلا من خير. نعم. He says that Ali ibn Ahmed al-Muqri, he informed us, he said that Abdullah ibn Ishaq ibn Ibrahim narrated to us. He said that Al-Abbas al-Birti narrated to us. He said that Al-Ka'nabi narrated to us. He said, I heard Hamad ibn Zayd saying that Ibn Aoun said three things. I love them for myself. There's three qualities that I love for myself, and I love them for my companions. And he mentioned reciting the Quran. This is something I love for myself, and I love that my friends do it as well. Likewise, the Sunnah. I like being on the Sunnah, and I love that my friends are on the Sunnah as well. And he said, and the third of them is that a person aqbala ala nafsihi, focuses on himself, right? Aqbala, he directs his attention towards himself. Walahan minan nas, and he's not busied by the people, what so-and-so is doing or what everybody else is doing, illa min khayr, except in that which is good. The third of them, so reading the Quran, being on the Sunnah, and that a person that they focus on themselves and they do not preoccupy themselves with the people unless that is involving in something that is good, right? The people are doing something good, then yeah, I want to be with them. But other than that, I don't got no time for it. I'm busy with myself. I'm busy with my deen. I'm busy with worshiping. I'm busy with reading Quran. I'm busy with learning the Sunnah. So I can't be involved in what everybody else is doing. I'm not up on the newest trend. I don't have the time for the conversation to be engaged in this and that and the third from the dunya. أقبل على نفسي ولهن عن الناس أو ولهن من الناس إلا من خير. Now, how does this connect? 3 things I love for myself and for my companions. This one is a stretch. I don't see how to connect it off the cuff. 3 things I love for myself. What's the reward? It doesn't mention anything about the reward. It's just 3 things that he prefers for himself. And one of them is being on the Sunnah. And so we see the referencing of the Sunnah, preserving it, reviving it, and calling to it. But I don't see anything relevant to regarding what the reward of it is, except that obviously Ibn Aoun, Abdullah ibn Aoun, loved it for himself. And if a scholar loved it for himself, then it's obvious it's goodness because he wanted to do it and he wanted others to do it. It's an example of calling to the Sunnah, but I can't see the direct reward in it. And so I can't see how it connects directly to the chapter title, i.e. the reward of those who preserve, revive, and call to the Sunnah. We'll take 2 more. He says, أخبرنا علي بن عمر بن إبراهيم قال حدثنا إسماعيل بن محمد قال حدثنا عباس الدوري قال حدثنا أبو بكر بن أبي الأسود قال كتب عبد الرحمن بن مهدي في وصيته التي أوصى بها أهله وولده انظروا ما كان عليه أيوب ويونس وابن عون واسألوا عن هدي بن عون فإنكم ستجدون من يحدثكم عنه. الله أكبر. He says that Ali ibn Umar ibn Ibrahim informed us. He said that Ismail ibn Muhammad narrated to us. He said that Abbas ad-Duri narrated to us. He said that Abu Bakr ibn Abil Aswad narrated to us. He said that Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi. Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi was from the major Atba' tabi'een, from the middle of them, their middle generation. He said that Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi, he wrote in his farewell advice, right, his last will and testament, that he advised his family and his children with it. He said in it, pay attention to that which Ayyub and Yunus and Ibn Aoun were upon, right? Pay attention to that with Ayyub as-Sakhtiyani and Yunus ibn Ubaid and Ibn Aoun, Abdullah ibn Aoun, right? These 3 individuals, and we've seen a lot of praise about them already. He said, pay attention to what Ayyub and Yunus and Ibn Aoun were upon, and ask the people about Ibn Aoun, right? Ask everybody about the life and the lifestyle and the habits and the customs and the guidance of Ibn Aoun. Because indeed you will find those who will tell you about him. You'll find enough people who will tell you about him. So this is Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi advising his family and his children to learn the knowledge and the lifestyle and the ways of Ibn Aoun and Yusuf and Ayyub. But you have to know that Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi, he died in the year 198. And so these individuals, Ayyub, Yusuf, and Ibn Aoun, were all his teachers. They all died before him. They were from the Tabi'een, from Sigar al-Tabi'een. So he's telling his children and his family, pay attention to what they were upon. Learn from those who have died. Right? Like the statement that's well known from Ibn Mas'ud, alaykum man kana mustannan falyastanna biman qad mat. Right? Whoever's going to follow an example, follow the example of the ones who have died already, because the one who is alive is not safe from the fitna. So he's telling his family to benefit specifically from these individuals who we've already talked about their status in the Sunnah, preserving it, reviving it, and calling to it. And he said specifically Ibn Aoun, because you'll find people who will tell you about him. So this narration is obvious. Learn from the people that are dead, benefit from the life of those who have died and passed away before you from the Salaf. All of that is clear. The question is, what's the connection to the chapter? This chapter, you can't forget that this chapter isn't just random statements from the Salaf, right? Yes, they're all beneficial statements, but it's not random. The chapter is about the reward of the one who preserves, revives, and calls to the Sunnah. So what does this have to do with the reward of the one who does that? I say the reward is in the fact that it leads to a type of eternity or a living after your death. From the things that people want often is to live on. They want to live on. If we could live forever for 1,000 years, we would do so. Fine. This is not the way it is. Most of us, all of us will die, and most of us will die 60, 70 years old. Small fraction of a time. Most of us won't see a century. That being the case, how can one live on? How can one make it 100, 200, 300, 500, 1,000 years? They live on through preserving the Sunnah, reviving the Sunnah, and calling the people to the Sunnah. And their reward continues as long as they live on. And so this shows you that if you want to accomplish this longevity and this permanence in the dunya, then upon you is to preserve the Sunnah, revive the Sunnah, and call to the Sunnah. So this is somebody like Ayyub. He died in the year 131 after the Hijrah, and we are in 1446, over 1,300 years ago, right? And we're still talking about Ayyub. Yunus, he died in the year 139. Ibn Aoun, he died in the year 150, right? He was the youngest of them, right? So especially ask about Ibn Aoun, because you'll still find people who remember him well and who can tell you about him, right? I'm not the last one who was around during Ibn Aoun's time. You can find other people. Ayyub, it might not be as many people that still remember Ayyub. It might not be as many people that still remember Yunus. But specifically, go see what Ibn Aoun used to do, because you'll find people who can tell you about him, right? So, but all of this shows that if you want that longevity, if you want to live on, and knowing that as you live on after your death, your reward lives on for the knowledge that you preserved, revived, and called to. And so this shows us the connection between this statement, you know, in addition to all of the other benefits that are in it, how it connects to the chapter title. The last narration we'll take today is the statement. He says, أخبرنا علي بن محمد ابن عمر قال حدثنا عبد الرحمن بن أبي حاتم قال حدثنا محمد بن مسلم قال حدثنا حماد بن زاذان قال سمعت عبد الرحمن بن مهدي يقول إذا رأيت بصريا يحب حماد بن زيد فهو صاحب سنة. He says that Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Umar narrated to us, informed us. He said that Abdul Rahman ibn Abi Hatim narrated to us. He said that Muhammad ibn Muslim narrated to us. He said that Hammad ibn Zadhan narrated to us. He said, I heard Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi, who said, if you see a person from Basra who loves the people, who loves Hammad ibn Zayd, then know that he's a person from the Sunnah. If you see a person from Basra who loves Hammad ibn Zayd, then know he's a person from the Sunnah. Like, the narration is clear. Hammad ibn Zayd, scholar, major scholar of hadith, right? Major scholar of the people of Sunnah of Aqidah. What's the relationship to the chapter? What's the reward of being somebody who preserves, revives, and calls to? It's that Allah makes you the scale by which people are weighed. We're talking about the status now, right? We've talked about the status a lot today. What's another status that a person accomplishes when they revive, preserve, and call to the Sunnah? Allah makes you the scale by which people are judged. Loving the Ansar is a sign of Iman, and hating the Ansar is a sign of hypocrisy. And like this, in every generation, there have been people that if you love them, it was a sign of Iman. And if you didn't like them, it was a sign of wickedness or hypocrisy or sin or deviation. Uthman, Ansar, right? And we can go on and on. He says, if you love Hamad ibn Zayd, this is a sign of Iman. This is a sign of being on the Sunnah. In our times, like before our times, you had people like Sheikh al-Albani, rahimahullah, right? The lines were clearly drawn. If you loved Albani, this is a sign that the person is on the Sunnah. If you didn't like Albani, it was a sign that a person wasn't on the Sunnah. In our time, somebody like Sheikh Rabi, hafidhullah, if you love Sheikh Rabi, it's a sign. It doesn't mean that he's infallible, that he can't make mistakes, that he can't be disagreed with. But when you look at the effort that he has put in, rahimahullah ta'ala, or hafidhullah ta'ala, and preserving the Sunnah and calling to the Sunnah and reviving the Sunnah, loving Sheikh Rabi is a sign that a person is on the Sunnah. And disliking Sheikh Rabi, Madakhila, Jamia, Muhammad Aman al-Jami, right? They don't like these people. Not liking these people is a sign that a person isn't on the Sunnah, right? It doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they say or everything they do, but you got to love them. These people are on the Sunnah, right? They've done more for the Sunnah than you or I might ever hope to accomplish. And so loving these type of people in every generation, there are people that Allah makes them the criteria by which people are judged and considered. Did you love this person? It's a sign that you're on the Sunnah, right? And like this, we see that this is accomplished through preserving the Sunnah, reviving the Sunnah, and calling to the Sunnah. Now, the author is setting us up here the same way he set us up with Ayub to get a lot of statements of Ayub. He's setting us up here for some statements about Hamad. And this is a natural progression of his previous chapter. His previous chapter was just to familiarize us with some of the people from the different cities and locations who were the imams of the Sunnah, those who were known for being the imams and the callers to the correct Sunnah and Aqidah. And in this chapter, in addition to talking about the reward of that action, he's introducing us to some of these people. So, right, you just saw like the previous couple of statements were all about Ayub and Ibn Aoun, who he introduced us to their qualities before that. Now you see him talking about Hamad. The last couple of statements have been about Hamad ibn Zayd. And he's setting us up to know the value of Hamad ibn Zayd. So when he mentions some of Hamad's statements, you know the importance of them because you know the quality of the person. And so he's going to continue with that. We stopped at narration 35. Like I said, we still have 15, 20, 23 narrations left to go in this chapter alone. 23 narrations to go in this chapter. And then the chapters get a little bit smaller. But one thing I will say before getting out of here is that this chapter deserves to be long because human beings are only motivated by hope and by fear, by desire and by aversion. And so this chapter is telling you what you get from being from the quality of these people who preserve, revive, and call to the Sunnah in order to encourage you to be from them. And so it only makes sense that his book would be begun with a detailed listing of the benefits so that you're invigorated and have this desire to go out and include yourself in these ranks. And that's why the scholars often, when they talk about knowledge and they give classes or you go to school to learn in the universities or whatnot, the first lesson is always about the reward, the fadl, the benefit of seeking knowledge and getting knowledge, because that's going to encourage, and you have to keep this in your mind as you're going through the book. The book is 5 volumes. It's a long book. It's a long conversation. It's a lot of points. There's a lot of technical issues. There are a lot of things that aren't going to be easy to preserve and categorize and maybe even understand, but you're going to have to get through it to accomplish accomplish these rewards. And so this chapter is long on purpose to make you constantly remember why you're doing it, and to make you constantly perfect your niyyah, which is what we mentioned in the first lesson of this chapter, which is that the niyyah of the student of knowledge should always be to raise the ignorance off of himself, and to raise the ignorance off of others, and to preserve the religion, and to defend the religion after, first and foremost, to make Allah happy, to seek the face of Allah, to worship Allah. So don't consider this chapter long. 50 narrations is supposed to be a book about Aqidah, and all he's doing is talking about the reward of the people who call to the Sunnah. That's to encourage you and motivate you to get through the book, to get through this knowledge. Because if a person comprehends this information, it's very likely that he will be from the people that are being referred to here. So we ask Allah for success to complete it, and to make it something that sticks in our heart and is firm in our heart and shows up in our actions. And we ask Allah to include us in the ranks of these people, and to forgive us of our sins and rectify our shortcomings. ربنا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. So even if you disagree with individuals, you still have to love them because they are upon the Quran. Absolutely. And this is a quality that is only for the people of the Sunnah. You see that Ahl Sunnah, their major distinguishing quality is that they're what? Ahl Sunnah والجماعة. They are the group. We don't divide. The people of Bid'ah are Ahlul Bid'ah or Ahlul Ahwa wal Furqah. Right? They divide, they separate. If you don't agree with me, you're my enemy. You're wrong. We're enemies. We're blood enemies. I can't stand you. No, Ahl Sunnah, you can disagree with me. Akhi wallahi, I see where you're coming from. I think you're wrong. But when it's time to make salah, we're going to stand foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder. I'm going to love you because of what I know you're trying to establish. Right? It doesn't mean that I have to be quiet about something I see is wrong. Kuntum khayru ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkari wa tu'minuna billah. You're the best generation ever produced for mankind. You encourage the good and forbid the evil, and you have faith in Allah. So we might disagree. We might have disagreements that get heated. It might seem that I can't stand a person, perhaps from the outside looking in. And hopefully this is never the case for us. But somebody who's ignorant might think that this person can't stand the other person. If you knew about the murasalat, the writings between people like Sheikh al-Albani and Tuwajiri, or Sheikh al-Albani, who was Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Ansari, Hamad al-Ansari's uncle. Is Muhammad ibn Ismail or Muhammad ibn Ibrahim? I forgot. But Hamad al-Ansari's uncle in Riyadh, the writings that they had back and forth amongst each other, the type of harsh, aggressive responses that they took towards each other. But I remember from our teacher that those telling us the story about when Sheikh al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala visited Sheikh al-Tuwajiri, Hamad al-Tuwajiri, and the Sheikh's son Abdullah went to go pour him drink, and the Sheikh Tuwajiri hafidhullah rahimahullah refused, except that he poured the drink for Sheikh al-Albani himself, at a way of honoring and recognizing the nobility of the Sheikh, right? And this is what a lot of us, the students, we miss out. Because especially in this infighting amongst the Salafis, often you'll find that a person is bickering with another brother, well, Sheikh so-and-so and Sheikh so-and-so, while they both agree about another Sheikh who is fine with both of those mashayikh, right? We'll cross some T's and dot some I's here. A person like Ibrahim al-Ruhaili, hafidhahullah ta'ala, right? When there was the fitna between him and Sheikh Muhammad Hadi al-Madkhali, hafidhahullah, and Sheikh Rabi and Sheikh Ubaid, rahimahullah, and hafidhahullah wa rahimahullah, right? And there was that dissension amongst them and that disagreement amongst them. And a person, if somebody said, you know, Sheikh Ruhaili, for example, Ibrahim al-Ruhaili, they would have a problem with him. How can you support Ibrahim al-Ruhaili? He's against Sheikh Muhammad, he's against Sheikh Rabi'. And then you see that somebody like Sheikh Sulaiman al-Ruhaili, no relation, just has the same qabila, but you would see somebody like Sheikh Sulaiman al-Ruhaili, who is known to be from those who are in support and closeness to Sheikh Rabi' at that time and Sheikh Muhammad at that time, and still supporting Ibrahim al-Ruhaili and not against them, right? And defending him. And it's so from the ridiculousness of the student is that they get caught up in this disagreement amongst the mashayikh. When the mashayikh, even if they disagree, you won't find them caught up in this disagreement to that extent. Another example from the people who have passed away, Abdullah bin Jibreen, right? And you see that Sheikh Rabi' Hafidhullah had refutations against him. Or even a better example that all of us can recognize, because somebody went, oh no, Sheikh Jibreen was this, but how many other scholars supported Sheikh Jibreen? But an even more direct example of this is somebody like Sheikh, for example, Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd, rahimahullah. And Sheikh Rabi' had a criticism of Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd, for example. But when somebody tried to talk bad about Bakr Abu Zayd, how Sheikh Rabi' reacted and treated them in that circumstances, trying to talk bad about Sheikh Rabi'. And I can cross the T and dot the I's way more than this. But from the mistakes is that the student, he has a teacher who has a disagreement with another scholar. And so they start drawing lines and dividing people and not recognizing the value of them, all these people being upon the Sunnah. And then what's even worse is that they carry that out to pass judgments on other people who might disagree with them in an issue, right? Even if we talk about the Mashayikh of Jordan, for example, most of them, not most of them, but the more prominent of them from this fitna have passed on to the mercy of Allah. But we see that Sheikh Rabi' and the Mashayikh of Medina, right? My Mashayikh, these are the people that I was educated by, criticized them. And it was a known criticism. But then you have somebody like Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan and Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad who didn't criticize them and supported them, especially in the example of Sheikh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad. Should I have enmity towards somebody who's listening to Sheikh al-Abbad, Hafidhullah, because they disagree with me and I'm listening to Sheikh Rabi', and we're both just listening to Mashayikh upon the Sunnah? This is something that doesn't make any sense, right? Respect the people of the Sunnah and love the people of the Sunnah because we're a group upon this. And we can disagree, but it doesn't lead to this hatred and to this animosity and to this enmity that unfortunately it becomes the case so much nowadays. And there's tons of examples of this. There's tons, classically and contemporarily. Ibn Hajar and Badr al-Din al-Aini, Bukhari and Muhammad ibn Yahya, all throughout the generations, right? But as one of our teachers said, Sheikh Abu Salah, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he said, if I'm not mistaken, it was Sheikh Abu Salah, he said that when the scholars disagree amongst themselves, now I'm pretty sure it's Sheikh Abu Salah. When the scholars disagree amongst themselves, these are men. And these men are like bulls, right? They're the leaders of their pasture. And I'm paraphrasing now because he said it in Arabic, obviously. But these men are like bulls who are like the leaders of their pasture. If you see two bulls ramming horns over whatever they're differing about, does it make sense to get in the middle of that and put yourself in the middle of that conflict? It only makes sense to get out the way. And so when you see these scholars differing about these topics, it only makes sense to get out the way, especially because a lot of the time, sometimes a person might end up being angry at a person or unhappy with the person. But more often than not, they don't hate each other or are mad at each other the way we as the students who don't know this dynamic perceive it to be. So we hear one of their statements and how harsh it might sound or how aggressive it might sound, and we think that so-and-so must be a terrible person. But then the next thing you know that the sheikh is having tea with him or listening to him or gathering with him in his home or visiting him when he comes, right? And so all of these things are meant, and I'm off track, and I apologize for being off track, and we've gone over our time now, but all of these things are meant to respond to that statement. Even if you disagree with an individual, you still have to love them because they are upon the Quran and the Sunnah. That is an absolutely true statement. Now, you don't have to agree with me, but you have to have the correct aqidah and minhaj, so that is enough for me. Now, mashallah, Allah yubarak fikum. We shouldn't get involved when the scholars differ because they are the ones with knowledge and insight that we can't comprehend. And even if I might not go to the extent of saying that we can't comprehend, right, that's hyperbole. We don't go and exaggerate. No, we can comprehend what they're talking about. We can understand who's right and who's wrong in an issue through learning and through reading and through understanding the different positions, right? And we might need to get involved if the fitna reaches us, right? If there's an error from somebody and it reaches our location, it reaches our home, you might need to be involved. And all of these things, to qadr bi qadriha, they are considered based upon the circumstances. But in spite of that, we don't get out of pocket. We don't go past our boundaries, and we don't start binding people to our understandings when our understandings are limited. We can have an opinion. I follow Sheikh so-and-so in this issue. I don't eat the meat of America. No problem. Alhamdulillah, you don't have to. But if I do, that doesn't make me haram. That doesn't make me a sinner. And so just like we can disagree in fiqh issues, we can disagree about issues of people, but it doesn't make one of us a mubtadi or not. And this is what a lot of us are missing in our interactions with each other. And Allah knows best. We have to just love all of the ulama upon the Quran and Sunnah. We have to love all of the ulama bishawq upon the Quran and Sunnah. And even greater than that, we love every Muslim based upon the level of the love that Allah has for them. From our tenets of Aqidah and Iman and Salafiyah is that we love an individual, we love them for the sake of Allah. We come together for the sake of Allah, and we separate for the sake of Allah. Right? I don't have a compensation. I didn't get, Sheikh Rabi didn't marry me to his daughter. We don't have close relation. He doesn't know I exist. But it's not going to stop me from defending him because of what I owe him for the favor that he has upon me of preserving the Sunnah, reviving the Sunnah, and calling to the Sunnah. And this is in spite of the fact that a person who is ignorant might say, Abdul Hakim, he's with so-and-so, they're against Sheikh Rabi. La abadan. Abadan. Right? If anybody knows me, they know we were loving them in the beginning. So why will we stop loving them in the end when they're the ones who we benefited the foundations of our religion from? But the person who doesn't know and the person who has fitna, a desire to encourage fitna, they like to sow these seeds. Well, if you're listening to Sheikh so-and-so, you must be against Sheikh Rabi'. Not knowing that Sheikh so-and-so is from the students of Sheikh Rabi' and from those who learned from Sheikh Rabi' and encouraged us with him. And so these are the things that people have to learn. Yes, we don't split communities because of difference of opinions amongst the scholars when those differences of opinion are tolerable, right? And, like I say, some of these, we're always careful about the words, and I'm way over time, but I'm saying these things because they're important, and I think maybe there's not enough people who say them. One, the Salafis never split the communities. The communities split because the messenger promised it was going to happen, and the people left the Sunnah, and thus they split. But the Salafi never splits the community. The problem is that to the extent that the community is splitting is to the extent of the deficiency in our Salafiyah. Because Salafis don't split. We're Ahl Sunnah, والجماعة. So if we find that we're in a community that this masjid don't talk to that masjid, and this guys don't get along with that guys, and they're deviant and we're deviant, and there's a deficiency in our Salafiyah somewhere. Because how could we all be claiming the same thing and be so splintered and disunited when the thing that we're claiming necessitates that we be a group? So this is a reminder to all that if you are Salafi and you claim this love for the Salaf, then you have to give a cold, hard look at, are you doing something to split the people? Are you encouraging it, whether directly, which alhamdulillah, most of the brothers don't encourage it directly, but are you encouraging it indirectly? Is there something in your heart when you're alone in the private settings, when you're with the common person? Are you having these conversations? Yeah, I don't know about them guys over there though. No, I ain't saying don't go pray there, but they confused. They don't know what's going on. They're unclear. Why are they unclear? Do they say they love Allah, the messenger? Do they call to the Quran and the Sunnah? What are they unclear on? And so these are things that people need to be conscious of. Allahu ta'ala a'lam. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.